June 6, 1998. At 5:42 a.m., the National Park Service received a radio message from Caleb Merritt, a 33-year-old seasonal firewatcher stationed at Pinecliff Lookout Tower in Beaver Hollow National Forest, Montana. The message was brief: "Something's wrong down in Sector 4. I see movement. We'll report back." It was the last anyone ever heard from him. The radio crackled with static as dispatch operator Margot Dyer leaned toward the microphone. "Pinecliff, please repeat. What kind of movement?" She waited, tapping her pencil against the incident log. "Pinecliff Tower, this is dispatch. Do you copy?" Nothing but the soft hiss of dead air. "Caleb?" She tried again, this time using his name. "Caleb, do you copy?" When the silence stretched to 5 minutes, Margot made the first entry in what would become case file #98-176, 0547 hours, lost contact with Pinecliff Tower after report of unusual activity. Park Service procedures dictated that radio silence from a lookout tower warranted a check-in after an hour. But something in Caleb's voice, a tightness she'd never heard before, made Margot uneasy. At 6:15 a.m., she called Chief Ranger Thomas Blackwood at home. "Tom, we've got a situation with Pinecliff." Caleb Merritt called in about something in Sector 4, then went silent. "Probably just radio issues," Blackwood replied, his voice still rough with sleep. "That equipment up there is ancient. Remember last summer when we lost contact for almost 2 days? This feels different," Margot insisted. "He specifically said something was wrong." There was a pause on the line. "All right. I'll send Wilson and Martinez to check it out. But Margot, let's not get too worked up. You know how those tower folks get after a few weeks alone." Caleb was stationed alone, as was customary, in a 60-foot tower overseeing 40,000 acres of dry pine. His daily logs were always meticulous. That morning's entry ended mid-sentence, 0538, unusual movement observed in Sector 4, approximate 2 to 3 miles SW of tower position. Possible wildlife but pattern suggests. Rangers Wilson and Martinez embarked on the twisting forest road to Pinecliff at 6:35 a.m., but a fallen tree blocked their path about 3 miles in. After radioing for maintenance support, they continued on foot, adding nearly 2 hours to their journey. The spring morning was cool and damp, with mist clinging to the forest floor. Their boots sank into wet pine needles as they hiked the switchback trail leading to the tower's isolated perch. "I never understood how these guys do it," Martinez said, breaking the silence as they climbed. 3 months alone in a box in the sky. I'd go crazy by week 2. Wilson, a 20-year veteran of the Park Service, just grunted. "Takes a certain type. Caleb's good at it though, 3rd season. Keeps better records than anyone." When Rangers reached the tower around 10:30 a.m., they found his radio still on, breakfast half eaten, and his binoculars placed neatly on the window ledge. But Caleb was gone. The hatch at the bottom of the tower was wide open, and despite the morning's dampness, they could clearly see his boot prints in the soft earth. "Caleb? You out here?" Wilson called, his voice carrying through the trees. The forest responded with nothing but the soft rustling of pine needles in the breeze. Martinez was already examining the tower's base. "Look at this." One set of tracks heading straight for the trees. Her face was serious as she added, "And from the depth and stride length, he was running." Back in the tower's small cabin, they found the scene even more puzzling. Caleb's coffee mug was still warm. His pancakes had been abandoned mid-bite, the maple syrup beginning to congeal. His government-issued Glock was still in its lockbox. The logbook lay open on the desk, pen resting in the crease where he'd stopped writing. Wilson keyed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Ranger Wilson at Pinecliff Tower. No sign of Merritt, but something's not right. We've got indications of a hasty departure." "Copy that," Margot's voice came back, tight with concern. Chief Blackwood is organizing search teams. Any signs of struggle or injury? Martinez was examining the simple living quarters, a narrow bed, a small kitchenette, a desk covered with weather instruments. Negative on struggle, she reported. Everything's in place. Two in place, almost. His backpack is here, Wilson added. Wallet, ID, boots by the door. So wherever he went, he wasn't planning a trip. There were no signs of a struggle, no drag marks, no blood. His backpack, wallet, and hiking boots were still inside. The surrounding forest showed one clear set of footprints, Caleb's, leading from the base of the tower to the tree line, and then stopping. As if he'd simply vanished into thin air. Chief Ranger Blackwood arrived by noon with 4 additional rangers and 2 search dogs. His weathered face revealed nothing as he surveyed the scene, but those who knew him well could see the tension in his jaw. Martinez, break out the topographic maps. Wilson, start photographing everything. I want the tower treated as a crime scene until we know otherwise. The dogs picked up Caleb's scent easily from the tracks, following his trail to the exact spot where the footprints ended at the edge of a dense stand of lodgepole pines. There, they circled and whined, but couldn't, or wouldn't, continue. I've never seen them do that, said the K-9 handler, Carter, confusion evident in his voice. It's like they're getting conflicting signals. The investigation became one of the most extensive search efforts in the park's history. Helicopters, dogs, and even thermal imaging were used. Nothing. After 3 weeks, the official theory was that Caleb had gotten disoriented and succumbed to the elements. But something didn't sit right. Detective Alexandra Reed from the Montana State Police wasn't convinced. At 38, Reed had investigated 17 missing persons cases in the state's wilderness areas. 15 had been resolved, 9 rescues, 6 recoveries. But this one wasn't following any pattern she recognized. People don't just evaporate, she said during the 3rd week of the search, slapping a topographic map of the area. We're missing something. Maybe he had a psychotic break, suggested the Forest Service psychologist. It happens to tower personnel sometimes. The isolation. Caleb had done this job for 3 seasons, Reed interrupted. No history of mental health issues. And if he wandered off, we would have found some trace by now. Park Ranger Elena Dunn, who had worked with Caleb the previous summer, finally approached Reed with information she'd been hesitant to share officially. Caleb changed last month, she said, her eyes darting to make sure they were alone in the command center tent. He started calling me on his days off. Said strange things were happening at the tower. Reed leaned forward. What kind of strange things? At first, just small stuff. Items moved when he was sure he'd left them somewhere else. His coffee would be cold when he just made it. Elena tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I told him it was just the isolation playing tricks on him. But it got worse. Reed prompted. Elena nodded. He started reporting strange lights in the woods at night, and claiming someone was tampering with his food storage locker. 2 weeks before he disappeared, he was convinced someone had been in the tower while he slept. Her voice dropped lower. He even filed a written complaint to headquarters that someone was accessing his logbook when he was on his supply runs. This revelation sent Reed back to the tower with fresh eyes. Combing through the records, she discovered that the logbook for June 5, the day before he vanished, was missing entirely. The book from June 1 to 4 was there, as was the one he'd started on the morning of June 6, but the crucial day between was gone. This wasn't in the initial inventory, she confronted Chief Blackwood. Why wasn't I told about a missing logbook? Blackwood's expression hardened. Because it wasn't missing during our first search. I saw the June 5 entries myself. The implication hung in the air, someone had returned to the tower and removed evidence after the investigation had begun. Reed ordered a fingerprint sweep of the tower, finding dozens of prints that didn't belong to Caleb or any of the search personnel. When run through the system, they yielded no matches. It was as if ghosts had been visiting the tower. As summer turned to fall, the search scaled back. The case file grew thicker with interviews, theories, and dead ends. Reed interrogated every seasonal worker, every hiker who had signed trail registers within 20 miles of Pinecliff Tower, even Caleb's ex-girlfriend in Missoula. Nothing connected. Nothing made sense. Then came the first snowfall, and with it, the official designation, case #98-176, status, unsolved. Reed didn't accept it. On her own time, she continued to visit the tower, reading through Caleb's older logbooks, searching for patterns or clues. In his entries from May, she found increasing references to what he called observation anomalies, moments when the forest didn't look quite right through his binoculars. Sector 4 shimmer effect observed again today, he'd written on May 17. Similar to heat distortion but temp only 52 degrees Fahrenheit. Duration, 17 minutes. Sector 4. The same area he'd mentioned in his final radio call. Winter made the tower inaccessible, but by spring 1999, Reed was back, hiking up with a new theory. She believed Caleb had witnessed something in Sector 4, something someone didn't want reported. Looking through his binoculars from the tower's observation deck, she focused on Sector 4, a remote area of old-growth forest that had been marked for potential controlled burns. The area looked unremarkable, miles of dense pine broken only by a small clearing where an old fire road ended. The fire road wasn't on any of her maps. For the next 2 years, the case remained officially inactive but continued to haunt those closest to it. Reed transferred to the FBI's field office in Billings but kept a copy of the file. Elena Dunn left the Park Service entirely. Chief Blackwood retired a year earlier than planned. Then in 2002, a break, of sorts. 2 hikers, off-trail in an area about 12 miles from Pinecliff Tower, discovered a set of neatly folded ranger fatigues and a rusted key ring under a rock formation. The clothes were nearly arranged, as if placed there deliberately, not discarded in panic or dropped during a struggle. Reed, now Special Agent Reed, returned immediately when contacted by her former colleagues. DNA confirmed the uniform belonged to Caleb, but no bones or body were ever found. Nearby, carved faintly into the bark of a pine tree, were 2 words that sent a chill through the investigation team: not alone. The carving analysis suggested it had been made around the time of Caleb's disappearance. The knife used matched the type Caleb would have carried in his ranger kit, which was also missing from the tower. "It doesn't make sense," Reed said, standing at the site. "Why remove his clothes? Why fold them? Why carve that message?" The location itself was perplexing. 12 miles from the tower was a substantial distance through difficult terrain. No casual hiker would attempt it, especially not someone familiar with the area's dangers as Caleb had been. Even more puzzling, the area showed no signs of long-term human presence. No campfire remains, no food scraps, no footpaths worn into the ground. Just the uniform, the keys, and those 2 unsettling words carved into living wood. The keys opened nothing at the tower. They weren't for any park vehicle. When Reed finally tracked down Caleb's parents in Oregon, they confirmed the keys didn't match any family property either. The investigation stalled again. Years passed. Parks Department records from those years show a curious pattern. Pinecliff Tower went through 14 different fire watchers between 1998 and 2017, none staying longer than a single season. The average for other towers in the same forest was 3.7 seasons per watcher. In 2017, a former fire watcher anonymously submitted a letter to the true crime podcast, Vanished: American Mysteries. In it, he claimed that he too had been stationed at Pinecliff in the late 90s and had witnessed figures in the trees, staying just out of sight, and hearing a man crying for help, but in my own voice. The podcast episode went viral, bringing renewed attention to Caleb's case. Internet sleuths combed through satellite imagery of the area, created elaborate timelines, and proposed theories ranging from government conspiracy to alien abduction. The National Park Service has never acknowledged the letter publicly, but internal emails obtained through a Freedom of Information request showed urgent communications between senior officials regarding containment of the Pinecliff situation and potential security implications. Special Agent Reed, now approaching retirement, gave her first and only interview about the case to a small Montana newspaper in 2019. "There are cases that follow the expected patterns," she said, "and there are cases that don't. Caleb Merritt's disappearance belongs in that second category. The evidence doesn't tell a coherent story, it's as if pieces from different puzzles were mixed together." When asked if she believed Caleb was still alive, her answer was carefully measured: "The statistical probability is extremely low. But I've never been able to construct a scenario that accounts for all the facts and ends with his death." The reporter pressed further, "Do you have a theory?" Reed was silent for nearly a minute before responding. "I believe Caleb saw something in those woods. Something that wasn't supposed to be there. And I believe he knew too much about it to be allowed to simply walk away." "What about the message carved in the tree?" the reporter asked. "Not alone. What do you think it means?" Reed gathered her notes, signaling the end of the interview. "It could mean he wasn't alone in the forest that day. It could mean we're not alone in a larger sense. Or it could mean that whatever happens to people who disappear like Caleb did, they don't face it by themselves." She stood up. "All I know is that Sector 4 of Beaver Hollow National Forest has been quietly redesignated as a restricted research area by the federal government. No public access. No explanation given. In the years since, 3 different hikers have reported hearing what they described as emergency radio transmissions in the vicinity of Pinecliff Tower, despite the fact that the structure's communications equipment was removed in 2005. The transmissions, according to witnesses, consisted of a male voice repeating the words, "Something's wrong," followed by numbers or coordinates that made no sense. Sound equipment placed in the area by paranormal researchers in 2020 captured nothing unusual except for one 3-second clip of what audio experts described as a human voice speaking backward at approximately twice normal speed. When reversed and slowed, the words remain indecipherable. Elena Dunn, who had relocated to Alaska after leaving the Park Service, died in a single-vehicle accident in 2021. According to the police report, her car veered off a coastal road with no signs of mechanical failure or impairment. Her laptop was recovered from the vehicle, and her search history showed she had been researching Pinecliff Tower in the days before her death. Today, Caleb's disappearance is still listed as an unsolved missing person case. The tower itself has been decommissioned, officially due to budget cuts and the implementation of more advanced fire detection systems. Tourists now take selfies at the base of the rebuilt structure, where a wooden sign reads, "Dedicated to Caleb Merritt, eyes on the fire, lost in the smoke." Few visitors realize that the eyes referenced in the memorial aren't just metaphorical. Since 2010, the area has been monitored by a sophisticated network of cameras and sensors, ostensibly for fire detection, but positioned in a way that ensures complete surveillance of Sector 4. What these devices are actually watching for, the Park Service won't say. The current head ranger at Beaver Hollow, when pressed about the Merritt case, gives the same practiced response: the Park Service continues to cooperate with ongoing investigations into this tragic incident. But there is no ongoing investigation. The file gathers dust in the FBI's cold case storage. All the primary investigators have retired or moved on. All except Special Agent Alexandra Reed, who visits the forest once a year, on June 6. She hikes to the rock formation where Caleb's uniform was found and places a small stone on top, adding to a cairn that has grown with each visit. On her most recent trip, in 2023, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The pine tree bearing Caleb's carved message, a tree that had been alive and healthy for her previous visits, was dead. Its bark was gray and peeling, its needles brown and falling. And the message had changed. Where once it read, "Not alone," the carved words now clearly showed, "Not the only one." Reed took samples of the tree, sent them to a lab at Montana State University. The results defied explanation. the tree had died from the inside out, as if something had hollowed it completely while leaving the outer layers temporarily intact. When she returned to her motel room that night, she found her samples missing and her laptop's hard drive wiped clean. On the bathroom mirror, visible only when condensation from her shower revealed it, were 2 words written by an unseen hand: Sector 4. The truth about what happened to Caleb Merritt remains hidden, like so much in the vast wilderness of America's national parks. Perhaps it waits in the forgotten corners of classified files, or in the memories of those who've seen similar things but chose to remain silent. Or perhaps the answer still walks among the pines of Beaver Hollow, moving just beyond the reach of binoculars, leaving footprints that end abruptly, as if something impossible happened there. Something impossible that begins with these words: "Something's wrong down in Sector 4. I see movement. We'll report back."